Good evening, and welcome back. Drift with me tonight to the border between Kansas and Missouri, where the land lies flat and ordinary, where farm fields lean into storage lots, and the hum of highways is just another kind of wind. Out here, near La Cygne and Raymore, life moves in simple rhythms. Engines, cicadas, the scuff of boots on gravel. Nothing about it announces that a predator was walking these same roads, calling himself a businessman, a mentor, turning job offers and chat rooms into open case files and empty chairs at other people's tables. Not far from those quiet roads, 5 rusting barrels once sat in the heat, sealed and forgotten at the edge of fields and storage yards, holding a secret heavy enough to bend the air around them. To the untrained eye, they were scrap. To the families of the missing, they were the answer to prayers. They just didn't know it yet. John Edward Robinson looked, at first glance, like the kind of man small towns are built around. He was a husband, a father, a businessman, who talked about investments, job opportunities, and charities. He showed up at church, joined civic groups, and presented himself as a man who helped people get on their feet. Underneath that respectable Kansas exterior, however, was a practiced con man whose entire adult life was a pattern of fraud, manipulation, and predation. When that pattern finally turned lethal, it would leave a trail of missing women, forged paperwork, and bodies sealed in industrial barrels. By the early 1980s, Robinson had already been in and out of courtrooms for embezzlement and deception, drifting from scheme to scheme as he tried to project success he didn't actually possess. He launched a consulting company called Equi2, one of several paper businesses he used to recruit employees and investors. On paper, Equi2 offered sales jobs and travel opportunities. In reality, it became a pipeline for vulnerable women, young, hopeful, often financially strapped, who believed Robinson's promises and stepped willingly into his orbit, never realizing he saw them as expendable. One of the first was 19-year-old Paula Godfrey, hired in 1984 as a sales representative. Robinson told her family he had arranged a training trip to San Antonio and picked Paula up himself, under the guise of driving her to the airport. When she failed to return, her parents reported her missing. Days later, a typed letter arrived claiming Paula was fine and wanted no contact. The language was stiff, formal, and suspicious, but at the time, it was enough for authorities to close her case. Godfrey was never seen again. The paper trail Robinson had created, phony business, typed letter, a story about travel, was his first real rehearsal for how to make a woman disappear. In January 1985, 19-year-old Lisa Stasi and her 4-month-old daughter Tiffany met Robinson under another of his aliases, John Osborne. Lisa was struggling, young, newly separated, trying to stabilize her life. Robinson presented himself as a benefactor connected to a Kansas City outreach program. He promised an apartment, job training, and help with childcare, then moved Lisa and Tiffany into a motel to get them started. On January 10th, he took them away in his car. They were never seen again. Within days, Tiffany reappeared not in her mother's arms, but in the home of Robinson's brother and sister-in-law, along with forged adoption paperwork and a story that the baby's mother had willingly given her up. In truth, the mother would never be seen again. Robinson's pattern continued with eerie sameness. In 1987, 27-year-old Catherine Clampett left her child with relatives and moved to the Kansas City area in search of a fresh start. An ad from Equi2 offered travel, good pay, and new clothes. Robinson supposedly had everything arranged. Catherine began training, staying in hotels near his office, and then one day simply didn't come back. Like Paula and Lisa, she vanished into a gap in the system, missing, but without a body or a crime scene that anyone could see. Even prison time didn't stop him. It only gave him new material. In the late 1980s, Robinson served sentences in Kansas and Missouri for fraud, working in the prison environment where he met librarian Beverly Bonner. After his release in 1994, Beverly left her husband to work for him in Kansas. Then her letters stopped. Her family continued forwarding her alimony checks, and Robinson quietly took them, month after month, year after year, cashing in on a woman who was already dead. At about the same time, he contacted single mother Sheila Faith and her disabled teenage daughter Debbie, promising housing and help with medical bills if they moved from California to Kansas City. They did, and then they too disappeared, while their benefits and pension payments kept flowing into Robinson's hands. By the late 1990s, the internet offered him a new hunting ground. Robinson began frequenting BDSM chat rooms and personal ad sites, presenting himself as a dominant master under the handle Slave Master. For women who were curious about BDSM or seeking unconventional relationships, he could be charming and persuasive. 21-year-old Polish immigrant Izabela Lewicka moved from Indiana to Kansas City after he promised her work and a committed relationship. He gave her a ring, took her to apply for a marriage license, and had her sign an elaborate slave contract, giving him control over her movements and finances. Then Isabella vanished. Robinson told people she had been caught with drugs and deported. His last known victim, Michigan nurse Suzette Truton, answered his online ad in 1999 to 2000. Robinson described himself as a wealthy businessman who needed a traveling companion and submissive partner. Suzette saw it as a chance to see the world and earn money, while leaning into a consensual kink dynamic. She moved to Kansas in March 2000. Afterward, her mother started receiving stiff, impersonal typed letters claiming Suzette was traveling abroad. The letters were supposedly mailed from Europe or elsewhere overseas, but the postmarks and tone were wrong. Then, the letters stopped arriving altogether. While Robinson was refining the script he used on victims, he was also leaving behind a growing number of angry, frightened survivors, women he'd assaulted, swindled, or threatened, who lived to report him. In early June 2000, one accused him of sexual battery. Another accused him of stealing sex toys and equipment. Those two complaints on their face looked minor compared to what he had really done, but they gave detectives something they badly needed: probable cause to search his property and his storage units. What they found turned a fraud case into a horror story. On Robinson's farm near Lasinia, Kansas, investigators opened two 55-gallon chemical barrels and found the bodies of Isabella Lewicka and Suzette Truton, killed by blunt force trauma and sealed inside. In a rented storage unit in Raymore, Missouri, 3 more barrels held the remains of Beverly Bonner, Sheila Faith, and Debbie Faith. The missing persons reports that had trickled in over the past decades suddenly converged in one place, inside drums that had sat quietly while Robinson played grandfather, businessman, and pillar of the community. Once the barrels were found, the rest of the case gathered speed. Detectives revisited the earlier disappearances of Paula Godfrey, Lisa Stasi, and Catherine Clampett, drawing lines between forged letters, fake companies, and the same man at the center of every story. The adopted baby, once known as Tiffany Stasi, now grown up as Heather, learned that her adoption had been arranged by a man arrested as a serial killer, and that her biological mother had never simply walked away. In 2002, after what became the longest criminal trial in Kansas history, a jury convicted John Edward Robinson of capital murder, first-degree murder, aggravated kidnapping, theft, and interference with parental custody. He received 2 death sentences for the murders of Isabella Luica and Suzette Trutin, and a life sentence for the murder of Lisa Stasi, along with decades of additional time for the non-capital charges. Missouri prosecutors, holding the evidence of the barrel victims, prepared their own case, but ultimately reached a carefully scripted plea agreement. Robinson acknowledged that Missouri had enough evidence to convict him of 5 more murders, and in return, he received multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole, avoiding a second death penalty trial. Appeals would later chip at the edges of the Kansas verdicts. 2 capital murder convictions were vacated on technical grounds, but his death sentence for Luica's murder was upheld, and the overlapping Kansas and Missouri sentences ensure that he will never walk free. As of 2025, Robinson remains on death row at El Dorado Correctional Facility, his name still invoked whenever people talk about predators who use the internet as a hunting tool. The man who once posed as a helpful boss, a charitable benefactor, and a seductive master is now classified in the starkest possible terms. A serial killer who turned jobs, charity, and fantasy into bait, and who treated the women drawn to his promises as disposable cargo to be sealed away in barrels when their usefulness ended. Thanks for listening. This has been Fireside Crime Stories, where the darkest tales are always read by firelight. If you haven't already, subscribe. And before you go, toss a little fuel on the fire. Hit that like button, ring that bell, so you'll be the first to know when another fire's burning and another story's being told. Until next time, rest well.